today I'm making a video for everybody of you who really wants to use astrology but doesn't have the basic knowledge or just doesn't have the time to put in to learn all the basics like what each planet in each sign in each house means. But there is a system called the planetary orbits, which you can use without having to know anything about astrology in order to make pretty accurate predictions and understand what the planets mean for you. This is a very subjective method, which means you're using your own data. You're going to be tracking the events of your own life and use that to see how you can predict what is going to happen in the next planetary orbits. Okay, so I'm going to start with explaining what a planetary orbit is. Basically, that is the time it takes a planet to orbit around the sun. And each planet has a different orbit time. For example, the fastest one would be the moon, which orbits, well, around Earth, not around the sun, in 28 days. Then we have Mercury that orbits around the sun in 3 months. Venus, 7 months. Mars, 2 years. So these are the personal planets. We're going to start out with those. Now, you don't need to know what Mercury means. You don't need to know what Mercury is supposed to represent in astrology. All you're going to do now is you're going to sit down and you're going to check where in your chart Mercury is, okay? So let's say it is at 14 Aquarius. If that's the case, you are going to take a simple astrological software like Astro.com, for example, where you can check ephemeris, which is basically just a list of like an Excel sheet of when each day the planets were where. That just sounded stupid. Where the planets were at each day. I hope you know what I mean. Unless you have a proper astrological software where you can actually animate the chart, which I'm going to show you in the second part of the video, the ephemeris is probably the quickest way to find out when Mercury was at this point. Approximately, it's going to happen every 3 months that Mercury will return to the point where it was when you were born. But since Mercury also retrogrades very often, sometimes it will take longer. So just check that and make a list. Be like, okay, January 21, Mercury was there. Then August 21, he was there again. And then December, he was there again. And then really check and try to remember what happened at those dates in your life. And then you will have an inventory of things that happened in your life every time Mercury returned. So you can deduct from these events your personal relationship with Mercury and what kind of events it brings on specifically for you. Okay? And then you can do the same with all other planets like Venus and Mars and the Moon. So these are basically also called the returns. For example, one of the most famous return is the solar return. We celebrate the solar return. It's our birthday, right? But we don't celebrate all our other returns, which are also our birthdays. Like we don't only have a sun birthday, we have a moon birthday, a Venus birthday, a Mercury, a Mars birthday. It's like we have so many birthdays to celebrate. So if you want to use this system, bear with me. I'm going to now show you some practicalities of how you can track this. So now we're going to look into how you can do this, okay? We talked about the cycles of the personal planets and how tracking them will give you an idea of what this planet means for you, okay? And what will happen next time when that planet comes back to the place where it was when you were born. First of all, we of course want to know what are the positions of the planets at the moments we were born. So we open our chart and we check. Like the personal planets are Venus, Mercury, Sun, and Mars and Moon. Then we have Jupiter and Saturn that are kind of, somewhere in the middle between the transpersonal and the personal planets. And then we have Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto that are transpersonal planets. Now, with the personal planets, you experience many, many returns all the time because they come back every couple of months, or with Mars every 2 years. But then with the other planets, you don't experience that many returns in your life, which adds weight to it. The less often a return occurs, the more weight it has, the bigger events it brings on. And with planets like Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto, we almost don't experience a return at all. Because see, one cycle of Uranus is 84 years. One cycle of Neptune is 156 years, and a cycle of Pluto is 248 years. So we will not experience those returns. So we have still very little data on how these planets influence our life. But therefore, I will show you later what we do instead of looking for returns with those planets. But for now, let's check out the personal planets, and then let's check out Jupiter and Saturn. So let's take one example. Let's see, my Mercury is on 25 degrees of Gemini. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pull out a list, I'm going to put on Mercury, and then I'm going to note down every time that Mercury has been on 25 degrees of Gemini. So let's see when Mercury was at 25 degrees Gemini. Now it's in Virgo. Okay, so I needed to go back. We just keep on looking, fixating the sign of Gemini and waiting for Mercury to move into it. Here it is. So let's say approximately on the 24th of June 2023, Mercury was in Gemini. And then the previous time it was in Gemini is, let's go back again. It gets a bit like you lose oversight. There we go. And then go back to days. And the previous time was on the 2nd of July 2022. So what I will do is I will note those dates down, and I will try to remember what happened on those dates. And then I will have like a list of different things that happened on those dates for me. And even without any astrological knowledge, I will be able to basically conclude the theme. I will be able to see a theme of things that happen to me in relationship to Mercury. And then I can do that with each other planet, like with Venus, with Mars, with the moon as well, although it's like very short, it happens every 28 days, but still. Now, the more important things are the planets like Jupiter and Saturn. The Saturn return especially is famous because it happens about 3 times in our life, and people experience this one very strongly. It always happens between 29 and 30, and then between 59 and 60, then eventually between 89 and 90. So we don't need to track that one. It's kind of commonly known. But the Jupiter return, it happens every 12 years, for example, so we can track that and we can see what happens. Let's see, my Jupiter is on 18 Taurus. Now, in the current sky, this is a chart of the current sky, it is on 14 Taurus, so beware, I'm almost at my Jupiter return. My third one, I believe, or maybe even fourth one, I'm not sure. Let's see when it was on 18 degrees last time. Therefore, we will go back about 12 years. 2012. It's in Gemini, so it's almost in Taurus. Let's go back. There we go, April 2012. That was my last Jupiter return. Yeah, I remember that. It was a very bad moment for me. I was living in London and I had to leave London for reasons that were out of my control, and I lost a lot. I lost like my master's degree that I was pursuing in that moment, all the money I paid for that master's degree. I lost my friends and everything, basically my whole life, just because I didn't want to extend my visa for no reason whatsoever. So that was a pretty bad event. Okay, let's see if there's some better info at the previous Jupiter return, which was another 12 years earlier, so 2000. Okay, here we go. Yeah, that I remember. That was actually quite nice, to be honest. That was the time when I had my first boyfriend. I was 12. I mean, boyfriend, we just kissed, but still. So I have two data points here, okay? So one Jupiter return brought me a romance, my first one, so it's kind of important. And the second Jupiter return brought me the loss of everything. But it would be also interesting to know that my first Jupiter return that brought me the love has Venus conjuncting it. So that indicates the love. And in my second Jupiter return, it would be interesting to note that my Jupiter is in the ninth house, which is the house of foreign lands, and Jupiter itself also deals with foreign lands. So I got expelled from a foreign land in which I was living. Jupiter returns are, if you would read the textbook example, they would tell you that it's amazing because Jupiter is a beneficiary and only means positive things. But as you see, in my case, for example, it didn't. And maybe a lot of you will also find that it actually nothing positive happened. I personally wouldn't say. I don't agree with the textbook example that Jupiter is always a positive thing. I believe Jupiter is a judge. Also Saturn is, but Jupiter is a different kind of judge. I think Jupiter lets you reap what you saw. So if you didn't saw anything, you reap nothing. So if you were lazy and you didn't work for 12 years, and then Jupiter will come and will take everything away. If you worked really hard and you've done your thing, then Jupiter will maybe reward you. So basically, I think it is kind of a judgment day where balances are equaled out. I'm not sure why this negative thing happened to me because I do feel like I worked very hard. Sometimes universal will is not so easy to understand, but that's how I like to explain it to myself. Now, that's Jupiter returns. Saturn returns, like I told you, happen at 29, 59, and 79. Sorry, 89. Yeah. So you can check for yourself if you already had that, what happened. And with the other planets that have this really long cycles, what we do, we check for aspects. So we check for squares, for example, and for trines, and we put that in our list. So let's take Uranus as an example. I have Uranus at 29 degrees Sagittarius, and since a Uranus cycle takes 84 years, I'm clearly not going to wait 84 years to find out what Uranus does to me. So I'm going to check for the first square, which is 90 degrees away, which is at 29 degrees Pisces. So let's find out what happened to me when Uranus was at 29 degrees Pisces. I will put the chart back to my year of birth for that, and then I will forward it until Uranus comes to Pisces. And we see it down here, it's moving towards Pisces. And we got it coming up. 2010. I graduated. What a coincidence, huh? I graduated. So this was a massive change in my life. I was a student all of my life, and suddenly I was not anymore. I had to work. I was an adult. Not really until my Saturn return happened, but I, yeah, definitely had to change my entire life. And let's see when the next aspect happens, which would be an opposition, which is if my natal Uranus is at 29 degrees Sag, an opposition will be at 29 degrees Gemini. So let's see when Uranus comes to 29 degrees Gemini. This is happening, oops, it's over, in 32, so in about 10 years. So in 10 years, I will experience another major shift, maybe related to the circumstances of my life. So maybe I will retire. I mean, if the last one made me a worker from being a student, maybe the next one will make me retired from being a worker. Possible, right? So this is how basically you use the data points you have from your past to try and make conclusions about the future without knowing anything about astrology. Hey, I hope you use this, and I really hope you give me some insights about data you have found and how you have found that the planets relate to you. Would love to hear in your comments. So let's explore this new tool together. And yeah, see you next time.